Hi, I'm Keeping the Reads, I talk about books, and here I am talking about another book. Surprise! Anyway, the one I'm looking at today is a pretty important book for me because it was the first history book I ever read 10 years ago, and it was very accessible, completely opened the gateways for me to fall in love with history reading. It's called Stasiland, Stories from Behind the Berlin Wall by Anna Funder. Anna Funder is an Australian author who, at the time she wrote this book, was producing radio programs in Germany just a few years after the Berlin Wall came down. You see, Germany had been split in half after World War II, where you had the Western powers on one side and the Soviet Union controlling the eastern half, which was called the German Democratic Republic. But the GDR was a sham democracy. One political party controlled everything about it for its entire existence, and they used the secret police called the Stasi to surveil the population in a way that was completely unprecedented in history. They also built a lot of borders, including the Berlin Wall, to close people in and prevent them from leaving. Anna Funder pitched the idea for this radio program where she would go out and interview people of the former GDR and ask them about their run-ins with the Stasi, which leads to this book being written. It's a lot more accessible and compulsively readable than you would usually expect from history books. It's not even strictly speaking a typical history book. It's part oral history and part memoir. The oral history means instead of going through very academic and dry blocks of text overwhelming you with information, you're sitting down with people and hearing them explain their experiences in their own words. It's a lot more immediate and intimate. And then on the memoir side, you've got Anna Funder trying to get her project off the ground, traveling the former GDR and visiting all these historical sites. Because of the way it's written, with very descriptive and sometimes poetic prose, all of that combines together to make Stasiland feel like a novel. The book starts off with Funder visiting the former Stasi headquarters in Leipzig. It's been turned into a museum, and so as Funder describes the exhibit, you learn about the Stasi right along with her. It's a great introduction into the subject. After the Berlin Wall came down, she mentions that people protested for the right to access the files that were collected on them. So if you're German, you can go and read a file that might be kept on you by the Stasi and not only learn about why you were thrown in jail or you couldn't get into school or you couldn't get that job you wanted, but you also learned who ratted you out, and that might be your best friend or one of your family members. The rest of the book alternates between Funder's interviews with victims of the East German police state and informational sections which details the history of East Germany, the Stasi, the Berlin Wall, and she also frequently visits these historical places and really shows you all of the scars that this history has left on Germany, and also the ways in which the former GDR has still been left behind when it comes to the economy, education, the population density, all of it. So it's a really great way of not only introducing you to this history, but showing how that history continues to affect the present day. But of course, the clear highlight of this book is the interviews. Each interview is given a lot of its own space, and rather than being presented in a question and answer format, it's presented as a block chunk of text, so it almost feels like a short story within the book. And each one is just as immersive and engaging as the last. You learn quickly that if you kept your head down and didn't rock the boat too much, life in East Germany could be fairly normal. It's just that it didn't take much at all to run afoul of the Stasi, and then your life could get ruined. For example, one story is about a straight-A student who likes to keep international pen pals, but the Stasi decides she has one too many friends from the West, and suddenly she finds she's not able to pass her tests, or graduate, or get any jobs, and she finds out that it's because the Stasi see her as an undesirable. and they threaten to ruin her family's lives as well if she doesn't cease all communication with the West. This kind of pressure led people to wanting to leave the country, obviously, and you could apply for exit visas. It's just that it was extremely rare that you would actually get one. So, of course, people would try to escape. And every escape attempt in this is so suspenseful. And then from there, there's being thrown in prison. You hear tales of windowless vans pulling up in the street and abducting you, and your family would have to find out what happened to you just by doing their own legwork, basically. So it's really harrowing at times. It's very suspenseful. Funder is great at pulling the drama out of things, but she's also great at keeping the tone fairly light overall, and even pulling the humor from a lot of these situations. Even some of the people she's interviewing find themselves laughing in retrospect at how silly the Stasi could be and how Kafkaesque this world was. We also hear from people who worked with the GDR, including propagandists and even Stasi officers. One of my favorites of these was with a guy who recruited and trained new Stasi officers. He talks about how he recruited people, what their methods were, and offers really good insights into what the Stasi was like behind the desk, behind the bureaucracy and the brutality and all of that stuff. It's a really fascinating look into how this police state functioned. The big reason that Stasiland has stuck with me for so long is because I read it at a really important time in my life that just so happened to take me to all of the sites that Funder visits throughout this book. I was also trying to get my own project off the ground. I wrote a proposal to my university to do an independent art project in Germany for 5 months, where I would compare Germany's turbulent past with the rise of extremism in my own time, and create large-scale drawings based on that experience. And I read a bunch of books for research. Stasiland happened to be the first of those, and I had it on audio with me while I was traveling around Germany, so oftentimes while I was sketching these historical sites or photographing them, I would be listening to Stasiland. And I did all kinds of really cool things while I was in Germany, including one time I got a press pass from a former Stasi prison so that I could access all of these areas of the prison that tourists aren't allowed to see normally. The project went on to lead me to my first solo exhibition and get my first accolades as a professional artist. So it's really interesting returning back to this book. It just brings all of those memories right back to me. But if I can take off my nostalgia glasses for a sec here, coming back to this book for the first time in 10 years, I did notice a few minor issues. The main one being that Anna Funder sometimes centers the story around herself a little too much, especially when she's trying to tie her own experiences with Germany into some kind of broader point about the essential German character and how it led to this history unfolding like it did. The most embarrassing example of this is when she's in a public swimming pool and she keeps getting in trouble with the lifeguard for violating the rules. So she does this whole Karen routine that's really like secondhand embarrassing, and then she goes off on this rant in the book where she's just like, oh, this character of the Germans with their rigid rules all the time. No wonder the Third Reich happened. No wonder East Germany happened. And you're like, okay, girl, get out of your own head. Remember, you're trying to tell stories of people with real problems here. But scenes like that do not come up often at all, so they're very easy to overlook, especially since you've got all these really engaging stories going on. So Anna Funder getting a little bit self-indulgent here and there is not that big a detriment. Stasiland is a really engaging, accessible work. It's a really solid introduction not only to this period of history, but reading history in general. It's also really thought-provoking. I found myself wondering how modern governments would react if there were mass protests to release all the information that governments and corporations have gathered on us without our consent. Because after all, we live in an intensely surveilled society right now, and the things that are surveilling us are the devices we carry around with us in our pockets. There's other reasons it's relevant as well, because the Stasi's methods have been incorporated into police forces all around the world who continue to be very oppressive to the people they're supposed to be serving and protecting. Not only that, but East Germany profited off of prison slave labor, much like Western nations do, and we're still not sure of the extent of that either. Just recently, IKEA was forced to pay 6 million euros because they profited off of prison slave labor coming from the GDR. So this is absolutely not a chapter of history that is closed, which makes books like Stasiland really important to read. If you happen to read this book and you're looking for something a little bit more substantial, since this is a pretty casual introduction, then I would recommend Collapse by Mary Serrati, which is a great account of how the Berlin Wall was torn down from grassroots movements within the GDR. Another good one is John Kohler's book on Stasi, which does a deep dive into the Stasi and its history and its operations, not just in the GDR, but all around the world. So yeah, this is a great topic to get into, and Stasiland is a pretty good place to start. I give Stasiland an 8 out of 10. That might be a teensy bit generous, but I've already explained why this book means a lot to me. I'll always look back on it fondly as the book that started my lifelong love affair with history reading. That's my review. So, have you read Stasiland or any books like it? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'm Deep in the Reads, and I will see you next time.